Hey folks, Rob Edwards here. Looks like it's another wrap for another season of Talkin Bout Rob. So we just want to say thank you to some of the guests we had this season. Vinny Epsey, Jim Crean, Todd Kearns, Josh Todd from Buck Cherry, Michael Licata, Licata Productions, Ron Rocco, Don Mancuso, Mark Evans, Mr. Billy Sheehan, Kip Winger, Rob Lamont, George Lynch, Doug Aldridge, Glenn Hughes, Jimmy Bell, Robin McCulley, and Mark Miller and Kerry Nadrowski, Talus version 2. It's great to chat with all you folks this season. So we're just going to give you a little review of some of the stuff we had this past season, and we'll be right back.
Amazing. So, Kerry, you're a busy guy too. You're originally from Macedonia.
Yes, I am.
You've been playing in the Rochester area, and then these guys found you, and then you're in this. Welcome to this Talus with Phil Narrow. It had to be kind of overwhelming. And Billy Sheehan. Oh my God.
Well, of course, when I got the call from Lisa in Sana. First of all, she asked me, "Have you ever heard of the band Talus?" I go, "Yeah, of course. I know that Billy was, part of Talus, and I knew about Phil, and at the time, me and Phil were kind of good friends. Every time he could have come out to see me play, he would have, jam with me, sitting whatever cover band I played with at the time. So me and Phil, since the day first I met him, we kind of clicked so well. I feel like I know him forever.
Right. Yeah, I hear he's just very personable.
Because when
very
he
nice.
moved in the States in Rochester, he was with Donnie Mancuso and they drive. So actually, Donnie was the very first musician I met with, and then he got me in touch with the rest of the local music scene in Rochester. And then I met Phil, so we kind of clicked so well. So that's
so you kind of knew Phil a little bit before they called you. You already knew something was going on here.
Yeah, this is when Lisa called me about the 20. That was I think kind of February in 2017. Prior to that, I've jammed so many times with Phil, so we kind of knew each other pretty well,
Right.
So I was out and about that day when Lisa called me about asking all these questions, and I was like, oh my God, is this real?
Right. You're thinking this, wow.
Because I know how much Talus means to everyone in upstate or Western New York, especially
right. Big following in Buffalo, in Rochester, and Japan, obviously, because they have a tribute band there, right?
Oh my God, but she said to me, don't say anything to anybody. We're still working on it,
Right.
Trying to figure it out, because I think at the time Billy was on the road with Mr. Big.
I think so. Yeah.
And then I got included into the group messages, And I remember when Billy said, yes, let's do it, So, and then I got to meet Mark, so we got in touch, so then he came out, as he said earlier, that I was playing in my trio at House of Guitars. That's how we actually met for the very first time, So I guess he gave the green light to the rest of the
Right. I heard there was a quick phone call and everybody gave you the thumbs up right away, pretty much. Is how it
I was like, oh my God. It was like, it's kind of like the dream came true, So, and also, huge responsibility.
Right.
There's huge responsibility. Not only as a guitar player, just in Talus, as I said before, means so much to everyone.
Right. Other guitar players that came before in this band, right? Dave Constantino, right? Mitch Perry, right? All these other guys.
And playing with amazing and powerful musicians like Billy and Marcus, and on top of that Phil, And I go, oh my God, I gotta do my homework so good.
Right.
So,
I think nobody could understand why they couldn't get signed back in the day. It was just like, they were just like so close. You guys were so close so many times to breaking the barrier to different things. You know what I mean? But what was your thoughts when you guys got Kerry in the band? You're like, okay, we're gonna do some shows, we're gonna do some touring, or was there already talk about
just one show?
It was just one. It was just one show.
Just put together one show.
It was just another one of those that's going to be a one-shot deal. And then it turned into the 1985 album.
Exactly. Well, the tour turned into that. Once we did the tour, we thought, geez, we're pretty. It sounds pretty good.
Right.
We could pull this back together again.
Right.
We realized we had all these songs left over that we never played and never finished and never recorded. So we thought, let's do this. So,
yeah.
There wasn't really a formula. I think it was just sort of like, just stuff would come from here and there, and we would kind of like throw our stamp on it and do our thing. And then, because keep in mind, we're like arranging as we're going along too. So, a demo is one thing, and then it kind of gets readdressed, and then Will kind of does his thing. So it's always like start with the drums, even though the drums are sort of built on a sort of track of a skeletal work as well. And then I do my thing, Steph's doing his thing, and put the vocals on it and all that kind of stuff. So it's, in reality, people keep thinking it's so strange, but people don't really realize that a lot of records are done fairly separately anyway. Even if a band is recording in one studio, it's sort of like often the band is together getting the drum tracks down.
Right.
And then everybody kind of goes off. The drummer.
Yeah, they don't realize like the bass player will come in, maybe he'll lay down some tracks. So the drummer will come in when he has time, he'll lay it on his stuff, and then you guys will play it back and then mix it together.
Yeah, generally, it's kind of like we're doing bass this week. Okay, so the bass player is there with the producer. The drums have already been recorded and edited, or what they're going to do to it. And then the bass gets finished. Then the bass is done. Then the guitar player comes in, or maybe two guitar players, whatever you have,
Right.
And so it's kind of like, I'm not usually just kind of hanging around while Slash is playing guitar or something like that. It's like, I'm certainly welcome to, and I have, but at the same time, it's like these guys are focusing on the work, and even with a guy like Slash, it can eventually get kind of like, do I need to be here? It's like, if I'm not playing and I'm not working,
you don't need to be in the studio for 6 or 8 hours a day. If you're not really,
maybe I should take advantage of some sunshine and get out of the dungeon for a while. But that's largely how records are made. I mean, the last Slash record we made collectively as a band. We just sort of recorded as live as possible. So, but that is sort of an exception to a much larger rule these days.
Yeah, right.
These days,
usually,
it's not really done like that at all.
Yeah. Usually someone's kind of leading the project, and they may even have bits and pieces of it kind of ready for you, and they just want you to maybe put a little spin in it or see what your take is on it, type of thing. But Absolutely. That had to be pretty amazing playing with Slash and having that whole thing going on. That'd be an amazing opportunity, right?
Well, it's been going on for 13 years. I mean, it's still continuing in whatever fashion we can kind of make it happen. Pre-GNR reunion, it was sort of a totally different thing. I mean, Miles was always the lead singer of Alter Bridge, so there was always the kind of juggling of schedules.
And they've got a tour coming out, I just saw. Right?
And they've been touring and have a record out. They toured Europe, and now they're going to America.
Right.
So it's one of those things where our schedules are just crazy. Everybody's doing other things, but that's kind of how I think I roll best in a lot of ways. I think I do actually really enjoy kind of I don't know what the word is. It's interesting to me to imagine having been like 23 years old and putting Aerosmith together, and then being 73 years old and still being in Aerosmith.
Right.
It's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, a lot of guys have multiple projects going on. Like you said, keeping themselves busy is better. It's always good to be busy. Like we were saying before, I'm so glad to have both of you guys here with us today for sure. So I was reading a little bit on your background, Joe. Started 13 years old, mixing tracks, your drum machine sequencer, going from 15 years old jamming Lynch Mob songs on CD to going to running studios, and then now doing stuff here with one of the most notable guitarists here, Mr. George Lynch.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
Where did it all go wrong, dude? You were so good, and then all of a sudden, just like
it's a bizarre story because on a production level, I was obsessed with like Nine Inch Nails and how they put all that together, but I also was listening to Lynch Mob because I'm a guitar player as well, and I couldn't pay for this. I mean, it's just Lynch and I working together has been the best thing ever because I get to work with my favorite guitar player doing music I like. So that's been the interesting factor. So
yeah, that's just amazing. And yeah, George and I were talking a little bit before you joined. I think he always kind of wanted to do something a little bit heavier, and the record companies kind of shied him away from it. And the sound you guys are getting on this is fantastic. The mix that's going on. George, what's your thoughts on the new material you guys got going on here with The Banishment?
Well, it really, for me, it's just I just do what I normally do, but I've just got a different partner than I would normally have that deals with music in a different way, accustomed to working with like regular rock guys,
right?
Which is great and wonderful too. But you know, I've done a whole bunch of that, and so to then all of a sudden, you know, be afforded all these other new resources and flavors
Right.
was very inspiring and refreshing.
I was reading a little bit about your history, and what I read that the first time you got to see Randy Rhoads play, you were actually there with Eddie Van Halen at the Starwood back in the day, huh?
Yeah, can you believe that, bro? When I first moved out to LA, I was playing with the guys from a 70s band, Angel, and I was really good friends with those guys. And one of them, the guys, Mickey Jones, the bass player, him and I were really close, and he was friends with Eddie Van Halen. And they came by and picked me up one night in Eddie's van, and it was before their first album came out, and we went out clubbing, and we went to the Starwood that night. It was Eddie Van Halen, myself, and Mickey Jones from Angel, and Dubrow was playing. It was the early version of Quiet Riot with Kevin Dubrow, and Randy Rhoads was the guitar player, and he was just on fire that night. And there I am watching Randy Rhoads with Eddie Van Halen, and it's one of those weird situations where when you look back at it, you're saying, wow, what the hell? Those are two giant rock guitarists, and they're icons. And here I am watching Randy Rhoads with Eddie Van Halen, asking Eddie, what does he think of Randy? And it's just an amazing thing when I look back at it.
Yeah, that's definitely so very, very cool. I heard a lot of stories that Eddie did check out Randy a little bit, and they were kind of a little bit at odds, a little bit trying to outdo each other in the early days for sure, you know?
Yeah, well, that's a true thing, because back then, you know, the 80s hadn't started, and it was the end of the 70s, and Van Halen was really, really big in the clubs around here in LA. And obviously, Dubrow with Randy, they were doing well too in the clubs. So they were two guys that were competing for an audience, and they were both giant guitar players. Nobody knew how big they were going to be. But sure, there must have been a little bit of competition in there, because even when I asked Eddie what he thought of Randy Rhoads when we were in the Starwood watching him, he kind of shrugged his shoulders, said he's okay.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the process has been the same since the very beginning, and you know, with the added benefit of all the music that I've studied in the last years and stuff, so I try to interject some of that just to keep the music fresh. But the process is the same with Reb and I. It's like drum machine, write a riff, go from there. So, you know, I intentionally cranked the guitars on this album just to give it a bit of an edge.
Yeah, it definitely gives it more of a crunch. And you guys premiered the new track, It All Comes Around, today online, which is getting thousands of views. It's a great track.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And it kind of sums up kind of what's happening in music a little bit, right? It all comes around, right? It's all coming back around again, which is fabulous.
It seems to be. I mean, Def Leppard and Motley Crue are out there killing it, and the rest of us are following. In terms of, like, you know, audience attendance is up. You know, this kind of music has really survived, and you know, this is another reason why I really wanted to make a record that had a fresh feel to it, and keep the quality control as high as I could and raise the bar as much as I could, because I never want to be one of those bands that like puts out 3 good songs and the rest of it's kind of filler stuff. But
Yeah, there's definitely great tracks on here. You guys originally arose to prominence, obviously, in the day with MTV. Was that kind of like a double-edged sword a little bit for you, kind of? I mean, you had a lot of airplay, but then also you got some sarcasm thrown in there from their little comic show, Beavis and Butthead. Was it kind of like a double-edged sword with that?
well, MTV really helped us a lot, as it did a lot of bands. And by the time MTV was in full swing, you couldn't be in the music business without being on MTV. Um, I mean, I think the Beavis and Butthead thing was just luck of the draw. I mean, I've talked to Mike Judge about it. And it was just kind of one of those things that happened. He didn't. It wasn't like planned out in the way that people might think. Didn't help us, but it kind of is what it is. So.
Right, and let's set the record straight for a little bit of folks who maybe aren't aware, and correct me if I'm wrong. So you started on stage at 8 years old. At 16, you started playing classical music after you were in some karate and ballet with your girlfriend. And then in Colorado, you started playing in bands with your brothers, Nate and Paul, plus your friend Peter. And then early on, you sent a demo tape to Alan Parsons, for whom you received a reply letter, and actually was chosen as their singer years later.
Yeah, all that's true. I was in the band with my brothers from day one. That's the band I was in when I was 8. I studied karate with my brother and then took ballet with my girlfriend, who promptly quit. And I was like really into the music and kind of got into that. And I did send Alice Parsons our demo tape, and he wrote me back. I still have the letter. And years later, he invited me to join his band, 2003, I think. And yeah, hell of a ride.
Yeah, and I think originally the name of the band you had was going to be Sahara, right? Until Alice Cooper actually suggested you use the name Winger, right?
Yes, the band, yeah, we were called Sahara. I wanted it to be like a band name. I didn't want the name of the band to be my name.
Right.
And we had promotional photos printed up with Sahara and all that stuff. And at the last kind of final hour, we got served with a paper from a lawyer that talked about a copyright claim with a trademark and all that. So we had to change the name and at the last minute. And back in those days, we were just out of ideas, man. I think
right.
the president of the label, Doug Morris, suggested Winger. And, that one stuck.
Okay, we now have with us, returning to our show, rock drum legend Vinny Appice and Buffalo Music Hall of Fame vocalist Jim Crean. Thank you both for coming back to speak with us, guys.
Hey, Rob, how are you, buddy?
Good.
Both of us in one place.
In one place at the
God.
same time. All right, so Vinny, let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about the Sabbath days. When you were originally called to work with Sabbath, it was kind of a last minute thing to fill in for Bill Ward. Is that the case?
Yes, it was. They were on tour on the Heaven and Hell tour, 1980, and they were scheduled to play Denver at the old McNichols Arena. And I guess Bill had a problem and he didn't show. And they had to postpone the gig, and then they flew back to LA because they had 4 or 5 days off because of that. And they had to find a drummer. And I got a call from the tour manager. I don't know how they got my number. I think through Warner Brothers Records. And they said, hey, we're looking for a drummer. You want to come down and meet Tony Iommi if you're interested? I said, yeah. And so the next night I went down, or maybe that night I went down to, well, I lived in Hollywood at the time, so it was easy to go to the hotel. And I met Tony. And he had a copy of my band Axis that I did with in 1979 or 8. And he liked the album and he had it with him. And we hit it off really well. And he invited me to go play with him the next day at rehearsal. So.
And what was your first show? Was that the Hawaii show? Was that your first live show with
them? Yeah, the Hawaii show was like 50,000 people. And then when I went down to rehearse, we played a couple of songs. I wasn't a big Sabbath fan, so I didn't really know the songs that well. And I heard Neon Nights on the radio a couple of weeks prior, and I didn't really know of Ronnie James Dio that much. And I knew he was the new singer in Sabbath. And I listened to it on the radio in the car. I went, that new singer sounds great. Ronnie James Dio. Wow, he's from Rainbow. I knew that.
Yeah.
So when they said, what do you know? I said, well, let's play Neon Nights. Because I know the song, I looked at it as it doesn't stop until one part. Then it continues all the way out. So it'd be easy to play that song. And that's the first song I ever played with Dio. and it was the last song on the last gig we ever played with Ronnie. That was the last song.
Oh,
So
very,
that
very
was,
cool.
like,
Very
weird,
cool.
weird. Yeah.
So you guys moved on to that after obviously Ronnie left Sabbath. He took him with you, and there were some debates over the Live Evil mix, and he left, and you guys started working on the masterpiece, which would be Holy Diver. So
Yeah.
and I've read that riff. What I've read, the riff for Rainbow in the Dark was something Vivian came up with from her previous band. And you guys kind of used to jam to it at rehearsals and kind of put some stuff together with it.
Well, you know what was I'm not sure if that was one of Viv's riffs. I'd have to ask him, but Stand Up and Shout was one of Viv's riffs from a band called Sweet Savage that he had before this. And that was called Bottle of Wine. And I actually have a tape of it somewhere, and you could hear the riff, but it's not Stand Up and Shout.
Right.
And it's interesting to hear it, and because we were writing songs, we were trying different jams and different things. I thought Rainbow in the Dark was more of a jam we came up with.
Right.
I started playing that kind of beat at that tempo.
And
We
what
were
I've
just
read,
jamming.
Ronnie hated the song and was ready to
Yeah.
trash it.
Yeah, that was Ronnie.
He was ready to trash it. He's like, you didn't like it at all. And this turns out to be like the song that kind of catapults this whole album to start with.
Yeah. Because we worked on the song, and then it became what it was, and then we played it for some females who really liked the song,
Right.
and that's a good sign,
Right.
It's
Because it
not
was a little more poppy-ish, right?
it's more poppy, and the girls liked it, and I
Right.
thought, you know what, there's no problem with that. So and then Ronnie, he thought it was too poppy, blah blah blah. And then at the end in his book, he says, "I'm glad nobody listened to me."
Right. I read that at the end of his book. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
it's a great song, and we put in the big tom, bum, da 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 da. That was the '80s. Let's put in those big toms.
Yeah. And
You
the video looked like it was a last minute thing. I remember him on the rooftops and stuff like that.
Well,
But-
yeah, that was another thing. I didn't know he was even doing a video. He said they're going to England to do press, and then next thing you know, they did a video.
Yeah, he had to do stuff.
And I
like
think
that.
Jimmy and Viv are in that video only because somebody told them, "Hey, Ronnie's up in London. He's doing a video right now." You
Oh,
guys,
really?
Oh, and they went and showed up, and that's how they got in the video.
Wow.
Starting in January 2024, a brand new season of Talkin Bout Rock. Keeping the torch alive, and we'll still be bringing you rockin' reviews from around the globe. Join us for all new special guest co-host episodes and our all-new Rock Roundtable with media consultants and promoters inside the music industry and musicians and podcast hosts. We hope you all join us for an all brand new season of Talkin Bout Rock, keeping the torch alive.